But welcome to the program. Appreciate having you on and taking the time. So I was reading a little bit about your career and what you've done throughout your life. Obviously heavily involved in business. And I'm curious because on the program we talk a lot about a lot of variety of topics, but primarily focused on helping young people really find their purpose, their direction, kind of find their step in life. That's kind of the underlining purpose of the program. So you got into business, did business school at Thunderbird. Mm-hmm. Is that even still around?
Yep. Thunderbird was picked up by ASU and still considered one of the top business schools in the world. It's a small school. Yeah. Like my class was 47 people, and but it was the number one school in international business school in the world at that time. Yeah. But great experiences and awesome program. But it's with ASU now.
Why international business? Because there's different business programs, business administration, business finance. Why international business?
Well, when you look at a lot of times people will talk about the globe shrinking, right? And with the way communication works now is you can reach across the globe, even though we have different time zones, instantaneously. Right. You can have real-time information that you share. And Friedman, who's an economist, talks about the never-setting sun. And so the way that business is going these days is you can always have somebody working somewhere for you or for an organization because the sun is up somewhere, right? So the way that the earth has become easier to communicate, easier to build infrastructure, and then it's becoming more service-oriented every single day, that it makes it easier for you to scale across. And so with international, and global was really the buzzword when I went to school. So Arizona State University had a finance emphasis with a global business degree. Yeah. And then I waited a few years, and then I went off to Thunderbird's School of Global Management. Mm-hmm. And partly because that's the trend of the world. And also, if you look at what happens here economically, here with business development, there's a global impact that's happening. I mean, something that happens in Turkey today could impact some other trade with finance or what have you. Something that happens in the Middle East, we see that today with oil and gas, it's going to affect prices and such. So if you better understand that the interrelationships, then your capacity becomes more dynamic. Right. So that's why.
And that's obviously probably been very helpful in all the different career steps you've taken along the way. How would you say it's been most impactful?
Well, I'll tell you, let me back up and give you a little history because I didn't finish my undergrad until I was 33. Okay. So I had been in a kind of your serial entrepreneur, started some businesses when I was younger, built them up, worked for other people, did a number of things. Mm-hmm. And then prior to getting married, so I got married when I was 25, and I had promised my mother before she would die that I would get my degree. Right. So soon after I was married, we kind of simplified some parts of our life, and I went back to school. Right. And then it took us a little longer because I actually built a little fitness company, and then one of my very first clients owned a financial services company. Okay. And he pulled me aside. It grew rapidly. That little fitness company was just supposed to pay the bills while we were going to school. And then it grew rapidly, and we started having some pretty tremendous relationships. And then so this client, the very first client, witnessed this growth and then pulled me in his office one day in front of his board and said, do you think you could do this in the financial services company like you did? And I'd never worked in that space. And
why did it grow so rapidly, the fitness business? Why did it grow as rapidly as it did?
It's just like it's relationship, right? Most of the business that you're going to find is relationship. And so I'll give you an example. It was mobile personal training, right? So people weren't really doing that much. They did a little bit where they go and stretch somebody or do something like that. But what I had done is I had built this, and I thought, what would be something interesting and different? Right. And so I went to a multiple equipment, like home equipment sales companies here in the Phoenix area. Yeah. And I said, hey, you sell that $10,000 piece of equipment. Who teaches those people how to use it? And they would say, we have our tech that goes, sets it up, and then teaches them how to use it, and they come back every now and then to fix it or to teach them something else. And I said, well, how about this? How about I give you a certificate for 3 free personal training for equipment over $5,000, right. And then we'll go out and we'll teach them without charging you and without charging the customer. We'll go out and teach them how to use the equipment. But we want the opportunity to sell them on future personal training deals. And they exchange this certificate for a discount on their personal training rate or what have you. Right. So think about it, the people have discretionary income. If they're buying a $5,000-$10,000 piece of equipment and they're in the universe, then they've got discretionary dough.
Right.
And so when you go out there and they want to learn it and they want to get in shape and they're right at the pinnacle of making that decision, so we did it. So virtually every single person signed up with us. So we had to start hiring other personal trainers and do things like this, and then eventually got to a point where we sold the business. But it was because I couldn't keep up with it. It was, and then the financial services came in, and it was the same thing. It's a very goal-oriented type of industry. Financial services on the retail side, you're trying to help people accomplish their goals and their outcome. So there were some correlations there. But the amount of money this guy plopped in front of me and said, hey, I'll pay you this if you can try. And I had called my wife and like, oh my gosh, and so I put our education a little bit on back burner again. And then I was able to get into the industry, and that's when I started to have kind of a specialty, if you so to say, in business development and such like that. And but it was just it's relationships. So you try to find out what your market looks like, what's the best way to get to them, and offer something that's needed. And so the equipment manufacturer needed it, and the customer needed the service. And so it saved them a lot of money and full-time employment, the equipment companies, because they didn't have to send their people all over the place to train people how to use it.
Right. So what, in the financial services business right after that, what was the focus there? Obviously, probably relationships, like you said, was a big part of it, but different industry. What did you really do to help grow that one?
So it's education, right? So that's even like if you think about going out and teaching somebody how to use a piece of equipment, you're educating. You're teaching them, hey, this movement helps this part of your body, and this is what you should do, blah, 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 frequency. Same thing with financial services. So I can tell you the first couple weeks, maybe even a month, I sat in front of a yellow pad of paper trying to figure out this industry, and it was tough, because I hadn't done it. So then what I started doing is I started reading a lot, obviously, trying to get my handle around that retail side, and then not being licensed, not having worked with anybody. And then my employer was doing some educational seminars around financial services in various places around the state and being fairly successful with it. So what I did is I took that emphasis and I learned some other things about compliance in the world of finance, like a Boeing, for instance. They offer some great beneficial services to their employees with 401ks and things like that.
Right.
They have to teach their employees how to use those things. And a lot of times they do these enrollment meetings. They're very short. They just pump them through. Nobody really knows how to do it. Yeah. So we started figuring out, okay, the corporate world, there's some corporations that are publicly traded that in the state of Arizona and other places in the country that are have very lucrative, very generous giving programs for their employees. Well, some of those are very flexible where they can also move them out and they have somebody in the world of finance that will be able to manage it and charge a fee or what have you. And so we looked at all that. So ultimately what I did is I got in and made it based on education, everything. So we had two separate entities, and the entity of the education was what I really ran. And then we did financial seminars in community college districts. We couldn't promote services in those classes. They had to stay, but we were allowed to offer somebody an optional session at the end if they wanted to come and sit down and look at their own personal finances. And then within the corporations, we would go and say, hey, look, you have this. There was a thing called the 404C regulations, and that was the one that said you have to educate your people. So we would go to the HR people and say, hey, how are you keeping up on that?
Right.
I'm not. Okay, we'll come in and cover that for you.
Oh, okay.
And in turn, we want to be able to offer an optional service. We will not promote our services the whole time. But at the very end, we'll give them, hey, if you have any questions on what we've covered, you can set up a private meeting with us, and we'll go over your own personal stuff. Bottom line. And so what had happened is when I started, there's probably 500 people that would go through these classes. Yeah. When I was done, I think when I left that organization, there was probably 12,000 people a year going through it. And we had anywhere, depending on the instructor, from like a 45% to 80% close ratio on these people becoming clients. So it was a way to hit the mass affluent markets and to get lots of assets under management and grow relationships. And it was all education focused. So when you really offer tremendous value with no strings attached, then it's pretty remarkable to see how people respond to you. And so again, the advisors were trying to make a living, right? And these people wanted to make the best decisions, and so you try to solve the problem. The problem was they didn't have enough resources to do the right type of education and compliance, and the corporations.
Right.
And so we would do that, and then the people attending needed help, or they wanted second opinions. And so we were there to provide that. And then the advisors, or if they became clients and it was good strategy, then they were able to make a great living off of it. So it was a really cool symbiotic relationship, in which was quality everywhere, is why it grew so fast. But we ended up becoming one of the fastest growing financial services companies in the nation. Right. And so this guy would just stand up in front of trade shows and say, "That's the guy that did it right there." And I was, pretty young, and it was just an awesome experience. But it was just trying to catch on to what is needed. Where's the real need? And that's a great way to solve problems, when you find the needs.
Well, almost going, multiple levels deep, right? Because some people would just go to, I need to find people who need these services, but you were finding colleges or HR or different compliance services that weren't meeting the needs.
Right.
And then going through those avenues as well. So find kind of a multifaceted approach to getting these clients.
That's it. Well, and it like you said, it's a need, right? So like if you think about different products or services that are offered on a daily basis or find their way into the market, how many times you go, "Oh man, I actually thought about that once, I needed that." And there it is. And that guy's making millions of dollars on it because they're satisfying a need, not just a want, but a need. The wants kind of die out and go away after a while. Right. They don't have the endurance because they're not needed. But when you find that, and it's hard in developed markets like in the United States, because a lot of stuff has been figured out, and we have solutions for most stuff. And when you find that little inefficiency, is what we call them, is when there's an inefficiency that you can create efficiency for, then remarkable things start to happen. But you've got to have a number of things in place to make it happen. Right. But when you can create efficiencies for organizations, people, that means saving them money, saving them time, helping them be compliant. What is it? What is the call, right?
Right.
And once you define that, then great things happen. And that's always the biggest challenge for young people that want to be entrepreneurial. It's cool to think, "Hey man, I really think those shoes are great." Well, how many pairs of shoes are out there? And is your shoe going to do something special for that person? Right. It may be really cool, painted or whatever, but really, is that going to differentiate yourself? Or can somebody come right in and take it away from you? So it's trying to find a place where you can be different and solve a problem that's not being solved.
Yeah. What got you into that field? Because obviously you said you're pretty young. And was this RG Capital?
Nope, it was a company called Golden Associates.
Associates. So when was RG Capital?
So what had happened is after I'd gotten in there, it was interesting because, again, I'm big on managing risk too. So when I started working for this individual, I started to have successes, right? We started having the growth. And then I started seeing these advisors making all sorts of money that I was helping them make, right? And I was definitely not making as much money as they were. And I thought, well... At Golden Associates, okay. Yeah. So I went, and then I asked the principal owner and said, "Hey, do you mind if I get licensed?" And, "Oh, no, go ahead. That'd be good for your perspective." So I went and got licensed on his dime, right? So he paid for the education and everything. I didn't have to take any risk because I didn't have to go out and get customers after this. I already had my job that I was getting paid for and doing it. So I went and got licensed. And then, of course, the natural next question is, "Hey, I'm doing this. Do you mind if I have a few customers on the side or clients on the side?" "No, I don't." So then it got me used to working with people. And he spent time, very great teacher. And he would spend time with me and working with clients and such and just trying to think of things holistically when we're trying to solve their problems. And so that led to it. And then what had happened was 3 or 4... This man was a great teacher, but he was not the best business manager with his financial advisors. They become like racehorses a little bit, where they're earning a lot and they have to be taken care of a certain way. And he wasn't compensating them fairly and such, and so a bunch of them quit. Yeah. And then shortly after that, they said, "Hey," they called me and said, "We want that business development. We'll make you a partner, and if you'll come out and do this." And so there was a half step in between RG Capital, which was called Integrated Wealth Management. And so we started this business, and again went to number one in the group that we went with, but it was all education based, right? And but I had to develop all those relationships over again because now we have a new banner. We're flying a different flag above the shop, and so I had to go back to a lot of my old customers and say, "Hey," and they all, for the most part, we started making a really good inroads in a number of different organizations, and we started getting there, and So that was that transition. And then again, a lot of times partnerships, and that's one thing I would tell you, that over anything that you do in the future, partnerships are challenging, especially if you have more than one partner. And even one partner can be a challenge. I had an instructor that used to say, joint ventures or partnerships are like sleeping in the same bed with different dreams.
Right.
Okay. And so you may cohabitate and do things, but it just didn't work out. So I ended up leaving, had to start over. I went off to Merrill Lynch, which is a big wirehouse, and then quickly became top 7% in Merrill Lynch. Is a huge company, 44,000 advisors, and then once my contract ended, I went back independent again because it's just easier. It's better to manage customers that way and such. And so that's where RG Capital came from. And then RG Capital again was one guy, me, and one assistant in a basement of a corporate building. That's all I could afford to do. Yeah. We got all the customers to switch, and then we started to build again, education focused and relationship focused, and do things. And then we became the third fastest growing financial services company, like 3 or 4 years in a row, and close to $1 billion in assets under management. We were in like 8 states, or we had customers in every state in the country and in Canada. And then we actually started to consolidate back to just Arizona from a service standpoint because of technology. WebEx and Zoom and products like that made it easier for us to have customer meetings with the guy in Illinois. We didn't need an office in Illinois. Right. That guy was good with just taking a minute to go sit at his desk and do a Zoom call, what have you. So we really pioneered that in the financial services world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was cool.
Wow. Okay. All right, and we're back. So we're talking about RG Capital and how you got involved in that. Is that a little loud? That's a little loud.
A little bit of reverb.
Yeah. And I guess a question I would have is, and how old were you when you got started in this?
Well, when I had the Golden Associates, I was probably 26, probably 26.
25, 26, okay.
Yeah.
So that's pretty early in life. What gave you that drive? Because I think a lot of young people, that's two issues is one, picking a direction, but also having the drive to pursue that direction. So what gave you that drive to really go? David, can we turn me down just a little bit? Young people, generally, I think an issue is finding a direction, but then also having the drive to pursue it and really go for it. And maybe it is, like you mentioned, really knowing and being able to, I think a lot of people dream about entrepreneurship or chasing their dreams, but the reality sometimes is not what we dream of. Mm-hmm. So, but what gave you that drive? And hopefully from your experience, people can gain from that.
Well, I think it's a mixture. So I grew up in a home with a single parent raising 3 kids and working 2 or 3 jobs. And if we wanted anything as kids, you had to go get it.
Right.
Okay. So I used to skateboard. If I wanted to skateboard, I was mowing every single lawn in the neighborhood until I had enough money to do it. Right. Or shoveling sidewalks and do whatever. I grew up in Michigan. And so the work ethic was instilled by my mom. My mother's a hard worker, and she did it. And she said, "Hey, if you got it, here's how you make it happen." Sure. And so gave a pathway that way. And so there was a perspective there, right? I also had other family members. We grew up in I wouldn't say we were poor, but I'd say we were pretty darn close. I mean, it depends how you define poverty.
You're
but
from
we were
Detroit,
happy.
Right?
What's
Michigan?
that?
Michigan, is that where you're from?
Yep.
Okay.
Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan is in the upper peninsula. That's the tip of Michigan, and then part of it was in East Lansing, Michigan, and which is the central part of the state. And so, in kind of having those experiences, doing whatever, I watched people around me too that were very successful in business, and I kept thinking, and I watched their quality of life. And I had friends whose parents were doctors and stuff, and back then, when you're a doctor, you really had it. You had a great lifestyle and stuff like that, and it's very different than it is for doctors and physicians today. And they have to work much, much harder than they used to. And so you start seeing these things, and you start seeing parts of life that you want. I wanted a family, right? I wanted a family forever. Mm-hmm. And, I watched my family divorce when I was 4 years old, and I didn't want that. So that was one of the big things. And then I wanted to be able to sustain a family. I wanted my wife and I to be the parents of our kids. So if it meant that I had to work extra hard to get her to stay at home, if that was her goal, which it was her goal, while our kids were growing up, then we worked toward it. So I had this. I'm very goal oriented. So the one thing about young people, I think you have to define what you want. Okay, It's one thing to say you want this better life and you want what your parents have or the neighbor person, or maybe you're in a situation where you don't have much money or what have you. There's no excuses not to be successful somewhere. Right. Okay, if you apply yourself in the right way, and you can define success a lot of different ways. But you have to start to find targets. So if I said to you, "Hey, Matt, you want to come over to my house for a party today?" And you're like, "Yeah, that'd be great." Say, "Okay, see you later." What's the first question you're going to ask me if you've never been to my house?
where is it, when, what time, what are we doing?
Where is it, what time, how do I get there, right?
Right.
And so how do you target something or create a journey or a pathway if you haven't even defined where you're trying to go?
Right.
So whether it's in the entrepreneurial world, you hear a lot of people say, I'm going to sell my company in 5 years. They call that PERM 5, okay? Everybody has this 5-year definition thing, which is a bunch of malarkey because they really don't even have a pathway to the 5 years.
Right.
But if you do, if you say, hey, this is my 5-year, this is my 3-year goal or what have you, and you set it, and then you might change it a little bit as you go through your journey, but you have to target it in a way that's meaningful. And you have to think about, you have to be somewhat realistic. I would never tell somebody not to stretch themselves on goals.
Right.
Because I do it all the time, and I come up short a lot. But I also, what do I accomplish is better than what some people accomplish because I'm pushing myself and I'm trying to do it. So that is one of the things I would do is I would set, number one is you have to set goals. And that's where I was super goal-oriented. I had 3 or 4 friends when we were between like 19 and 20, and we had goals. And we had this one goal of all of us, trying to be millionaires by a certain age. When you say that, it's like, okay, great. How are you going to get $1 million? Okay.
Right.
Are you going to be a gym owner? Are you going to be a mechanic and have a shop? Are you going to invent something really cool? Are you going to be a technologist? Are you going to be a news person? Who knows? How are you going to define yourself and the outcome? But what's the path to getting there? And so that was the one thing we missed when we were younger was the pathway to get there. And then when I moved to Arizona, I started to set a pathway. I started to find myself in a groove to where I felt comfortable. It's something I'd never thought, but it was just life experiences.
Right.
And moving forward. The other big thing that I think helped me is every job, and you've heard people say this to you, your parents probably said to you, other people have said it, you've probably heard, your listeners probably have had people say it to them. When you have a job, make the job better than when you got there.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Always make it better. We tell our kids when they babysit, clean the house before you leave.
Right.
And they're like, what? And you're like, do the dishes, clean the house, make it so when the people walk in, they go, wow, this kid's awesome. And guess who's getting the call back to babysit again, right? And then you get to, so it's the same kind of concept. And then when you dig in, you also learn perspective. Right. So when I took that financial services company, this was so far outside my wheelhouse. I mean, foreign in every sense of the way. But then I started digging in. I wanted to learn. I wanted to be educated. I wanted to have as much depth of understanding of that industry as I possibly could, partially because I was young. People didn't look at me very credibly, when I was younger. But when I opened my mouth and started talking about the issues around that profession, people went, "Oh, he knows. He's got it. He's young. Right. He's got it." And then I made that company better. We increased total revenue by I think 315%, and we decreased the cost by 15% or something. It was some ridiculous growth, but it was not that we had some secret sauce. We just applied steps and made it happen. But so all of those things along this line were all goal oriented.
Yeah.
Okay. Like when I went back to Thunderbird, I didn't need to go to Thunderbird. I already built a couple businesses, already had some money. Even the people interviewing to go to that school said, "Why are you going back to school? You already do what we're going to teach you to do." And I just wanted more input. I wanted more education. I had not traveled I've traveled the world, but I hadn't worked in different places in the world. And all these instructors had what? Different perspective.
Right.
So when you add perspective to people, then they start to see what's possible. Can I give you a side story? So one of the things that I've had the good fortune to do in my life is got very involved in Haiti, right? Haiti's one of the poorest nations in the Western Hemisphere, 65% illiterate. It is like truly the floor mat of a whole bunch of nations. They just treat it. It's the purest African culture in the world because people don't like to intermix with Haitians. And Haiti came up because they just think they're dirty and cursed.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And Haiti, as far as their, it was the island, with the Dominican Haiti, they used as a stopping off point for slave trade. So that's how the Africans ended up there. And so when you go to this island, these people have been through crazy stuff, right? A whole bunch of dictatorships, drug cartels, civil wars like they're experiencing right now. Just like, man, just repressed. If you see somebody smile in Haiti, it's awesome, okay? But it's because it's so rare to see somebody really open up and give you a great, genuine smile. So what I can share some of the other experiences, but the one that I want to talk about is like I was walking down the road one time, and I looked alongside the road, and there were about 7 men sitting behind shoe shine boxes, right? Mm-hmm. So they're shoe shiners. And one customer out of all 7, and they sat there. And I kind of hung out because I just wanted to see from a perspective standpoint what was going on. Those men sat there all day long for 8 hours, and I think they maybe had 3 or 4 customers combined.
Right.
Okay? So when they go home, they say, hey, we had a long day of work.
Yeah.
And that's it. but they weren't sitting there dreaming about what I could do to change my course.
Right.
Could I go drive a taxi? Could I go get a government job? Could I go do this? They don't think like that, okay? Because their perspective has been so repressed that they don't think in terms. Now, when you find somebody that, and sometimes it's just exposure to TV.
Sure.
They start seeing things that are possible and they go, oh, or because they're illiterate, they're not reading books. They're not reading about all these different entrepreneurs and they just, because they can't. They don't have the frame of reference whatsoever. So when somebody finally catches the spark and they see something that's possible, that they need,
right,
they do it. So one guy we met, think about a wire strand with one LED light on the bottom. Okay?
Yeah.
How much would you pay for that?
Here, maybe $1.
$1, right? So in Haiti, it's probably $5. Okay?
Okay.
This guy would bring these because people had very pathetic electricity, couldn't afford electricity. They would pirate the electricity, burn to death actually all the time, doing it. It's horrifying.
Yeah.
And but he started selling these single strands with one LED light because that one LED light could light a room just enough for them to do everything they need to do at nighttime. If not, when the lights go out in Haiti, because a lot of times they go into just like an energy preservation at night because their infrastructure is so poor. Those little LED lights are keeping the rooms lit up. So all of a sudden, he's selling 5 of those per house, 25 per house, 10 per house. This guy became a self-made millionaire in Haiti selling LED strands. Okay, but there's a need, right?
Yeah.
And so he met the need. He didn't want to be sitting behind a shoe shine box, or picking up trash for the government, doing things like that. He started thinking through some innovative ways to do things. And we even set up an incubator down there for years called Blue Mango. And Blue Mango, we found people that were literate, okay, were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So one of the fastest ways for us to do that was find return missionaries, okay, that were literate and they were bilingual, okay. And then they would, if they qualified, they'd take a test. And if they qualified for a program, we actually paid them to go to school. So we paid them a wage. It was like $100 a month or something like that. And that's enough at that time. It was enough to feed a family of 4. Okay, $100 a month U.S. and to get certified and all these different Microsoft certifications. If they passed one, then they were able to elevate and move to the next one. If they did not pass the test, they were out. Okay, if they passed the test, we would double their wage and then go on to the next certification. So long story short, we had a number of guys go through this and young ladies go through this program. At the end of the program, we stopped it after the earthquake. A lot of our buildings got destroyed. But if you go down and look in Haiti now, most of the system administrators for the biggest hospitals, corporations, and all are these guys.
Really?
They didn't have any knowledge of how to do anything. Okay, they didn't. Half of them had never really even opened a computer. They used phones. That's it. Yeah. And so now they became the boss, for all this stuff, and they earned it. And so it's perspective, right?
Sure.
So when you bring people perspective, they do it. So young people, I would say, read. Okay, you may not like it. Listen to my one son listens to audiobooks constantly, and that's reading, right? You're trying to fill your mind with different perspectives, absorbing and such. Knowledge, yeah, and then you start to find a little bit of something that might be interesting to you. And then if you start to see something that seems to be inefficient, and you think, you could do these, simplify that. Well, then check it out. See if there's something to it, and then pursue it. And then you may have an outcome that you just never in a million years thought you would. And sometimes the most simple ideas are remarkable. My friend has a book about starting something stupid.
Yeah.
A lot of times people will say, that's a stupid idea. And then you go, yeah, maybe it is a stupid idea, but you start it, and then the market grabs it.
Right.
So whether you want to be an entrepreneur or you want to work with somebody, either place is good. But if you set a goal, whether it's an educational process you have to go through to get there, or if you have to take risk as an entrepreneur and find your way, you do it. Set the goals.
Yeah. So, what got you working in Haiti in the first place? Was that? Why
so so we had one family member as a nurse, and she would go down to Haiti about every quarter and help with prosthetics. Okay. And so it was called Healing Hands for Haiti. So this charity was already set up. Mm-hmm. And then there was a time where my father-in-law did very well financially. I mean, he's been very successful with business, and he wanted to do something philanthropic. So he was looking for something that was meaningful.
Sure.
Okay. And so he went down there to see. And what's interesting in these cultures like Haiti, if you lose a limb, you become unwhole. Okay. So if you have
culturally,
yeah. So your families have a very difficult time, if not impossible time, to take care of you because they can't manage it. Okay, so they drop you off at an orphanage or do whatever. They literally have, some orphanages have one-way doggy doors. Okay, where literally people push their kids through and leave them on the other side of the door.
Oh, wow.
So and they just leave. No records, no names, nothing. They do it because the parents are heartbroken, but they know that that's the only way these kids are going to survive. Okay?
Right.
So they do that, and then. So if you're going to school, you're not really welcome back in the public school systems. If you have any government assistance, they pull it because you're cursed. You're not whole. Okay.
Sure.
So now imagine you go to Haiti and you fashion this nice artificial leg for some woman that has been unwhole for a long time and literally looked down on when she's walking down the streets or doing whatever. And when you fit her and put her and she stands up for the first time, you want to see a smile. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Their lives change. Their families take them back. They get their support back. They're whole again. So they're no longer missing something. And so the culture pulls them back in the community. And it's so it's incredibly rewarding. So he got involved and then decided to go serve a mission for our church for 3 years. And so somebody had to administer. So I had already been helping because of my businesses and technology and such. Blue Mango was from my company and stuff. But I took over the administration of the property and all the other programs that were going on. And so I had an apartment in Port-au-Prince, and so I was down there every quarter for any length of time and dealing with it. And then when the earthquake happened, it shifted our trajectory massively. What we were able to do, and some of the goals we had actually set. One of the goals was to set up a hospital in Port-au-Prince. And because of the earthquake, and because we were the only organization that could handle all the amputees and such, tons of money came in. So we built the first rehabilitation hospital in the Caribbean. Is in Haiti and Port-au-Prince.
Oh, wow.
And so we donated that property, and then we sold another parcel of land and built out some guest homes and stuff like that. But then I handed the administration over to International Red Cross, a Leg to Stand, and Sorensen Foundation got involved. A whole bunch of groups got involved. And so now it's pretty self-sufficient, doing great.
I see. So is that organization still operating there?
Sure is.
Okay.
Yep. And doing great stuff. And our mission was to teach the Haitians to be self-sufficient, teach them to be the prosthetic techs, teach them to be the physical therapist, teach them to be the occupational therapist. And then, physicians, obviously that's a little more challenging, but the Physicians Doctors Without Borders partners with us, and a whole bunch of other doctors, physicians come down there. People that are non-medical volunteers will come down and help putting together wheelchairs and doing things, so it's really cool. Or you might have some handyman stuff that needs to happen with plumbing or this, that, and the other. And so it's pretty neat to watch it. And but the Haitians have really stepped up. And again, it's back to perspective. If you give people opportunities to learn, they do it. Yeah. But again, the other thing you were talking about with the young people too is desire. It's pretty comfortable sitting on mom and dad's couch playing video games, right?
Right.
And they can sit back and dream. And they probably do about what they would like to have as an outcome and options and stuff like that. But if they don't get off the couch and they don't apply themselves and start to dig in and actually feel a little bit of pain,
right,
they're not going to have an outcome that's going to be meaningful at all. And it's and so that whole pain element is something that's real. Trading time for money is painful. Right. There's a book by Frederick Bastiat, and he actually touches on this, and he says. There's really two types of people or things that happen, and this is his worry about socialism, right, and things taking over, is he basically says, on one hand, if you go to somebody and say, look, you can work and you can trade your time for money and do all this stuff and you're going to be able to provide for yourself and have a good outcome, then you are going to be able to sustain your family, do everything. People go, okay, that sounds great. But he classifies that as pain. Okay. Mm-hmm. The other classification is plunder. This is not somebody walking through a business community and smashing the windows and grabbing a computer. That's not the plunder he's talking about. The plunder he's talking about is if you have the government come along and say, hey, you know what? I know you're working hard and you're providing yourself, but I'll tell you what, I'll give you the money that you need to support yourself. You just have to, maybe it's not the same amount of money, but it's close.
Right.
And but you can sustain yourself, have the same standard of living, but you just don't work anymore. Which do you take? And so what happens is people start to gravitate away from the pain or the productivity and stuff like that into this notion of plunder because it's comfortable. It's there. It may not be there forever. They don't realize that. But what happens is they stop learning how to work. They stop having a callous to the pain, right? Like when you go to work every morning, sometimes you just don't want to get out of bed. You have to, right?
Yeah.
And so all that ceases to exist. And so you have this pain and plunder. So people have to realize you have to trade time for money. It's going to be temporary. There's going to be time to play and have a good time and all this stuff. But if you go to this plunder stuff, then the whole environment's going to implode on itself. And so the young people sitting at home, and you hear these stories. I go out with friends, I'm like, yeah, my 30-year-old is sitting on that couch and playing video games, and he works part-time at Castles and Coasters, and he's and it's like no life, right?
Right.
Where's I'd love to be married someday. I'd love to have kids. I'd love to have a car that I want to drive, or a home, or maybe a second property, or be able to have some freedom. Those are real and they're attainable. But they are not going to happen if you don't get off the couch, put the controller down, define the goals, and set the course.
Right.
That's the only way it's going to. And then do it. You have to actually execute and go try to do it. And you're going to fail, and you're going to win, and you're going to fail, and you're going to win. But what's going to happen is you're going to learn how to win more frequently because you don't like to fail, and then those outcomes are going to start to fall into place nicely.
So in your book, Job Killers, you talk about the me generation. I think you quote Dr. Twench on that. And I think you're hitting on that right now, that kind of generation that's, I guess it's ultra comfortable. Is that what is causing that feeling of entitlement? I know you cited an experience working with somebody who came to you and wanted to, wanted a certain amount for starting in the company, and ended up working out. But what do you think is really fueling that entitlement?
I think it's back to your personal experiences, right? You sit in your, let's just say, your parents' home or even your grandparents' home. You're sitting in a living room. They've got a big screen TV. That's nice. That's comfortable. Let's say you grew up with that.
Right.
Okay. Now you move off on your own. You're in an apartment, and you're sitting there. and You're like, I'd love to have that big screen TV. Well, hey, guess what? Walmart has one for $65 or $650 now. It's cheap.
Yeah.
But you don't have the cash, but you got a credit card.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do people do is they go out and they consume like crazy. And they buy and they do things because they want to experience the comforts that their parents or grandparents earned, over time. They were maybe not even accustomed to what life was like when they were little. Like my first 3 kids, we had a pretty small little house. We didn't have anything grand. Right. We kept our lives very simple. When we did days out, it was to the park and to munch on picnics and stuff like that. We were simple. Sure. And then it evolved. So now maybe we'll do movies once in this or whatever. And then now we could go to a movie we want to go to a movie, right? And but they're accustomed. If they grew up in our environment all the way through to that, they start to get accustomed to that. And so I think a lot of times this self-centered approach isn't really a selfish approach. It's their experience and the comfort from their experiences. They want to repeat that. And instead of understanding that there's a process to it, and a timeline for successful, sustainable outcomes, they want to jump right to the end. And so that's like this guy that came to work for me. He's like, oh, yeah, I looked online at people with my education. They make this much money. Well, where was your last job? His last job before applying in my company was Cold Stone Creamery, okay? Right. So how do you establish value when you don't have any value for me right now?
Right.
Because you've never proven your outcome. Now this guy literally is an executive at a very big financial, like operational company, like American Express type of company.
Yeah.
And he is kicking butt. Okay, but
awesome.
He established value, got multiple raises, and I think within a year and a half, he went from making $28,000 to $80,000 a year.
Wow.
And then sustained that for a bit, and then went off and worked for PetSmart and a few other companies, and just worked his way up in the big corporate ladder, and he's done fantastic. Valuable, right?
Right.
I didn't have any I would have been, if I knew the value he had when he first applied, I wouldn't have had a problem paying him the $80 day one.
Yeah.
But he didn't have any, right? He could use a spreadsheet. That's fantastic. Most young people that come out of a finance degree at ASU can use a spreadsheet, I hope. And he could. But that does nothing because he didn't have any perspective.
Yeah.
But he gained it quickly, and he dug in and he did things. So that's it. That's the difference. Is you just can't expect things. I mean, it's just unreasonable. One example I could give you too. When I was, it's probably 20, maybe a little younger, and there was a powerhouse gym that was opening in the area where I was going to college, and so I went there to get a job. They were just building it out. It wasn't open yet. They were doing pre-sales and stuff. And I went in, didn't have equipment, didn't have tiles on the floor, it was a dirty mess. And I went into the owner and said, hey, I'd love to have a job here. what can I do for you? He said, nothing. I don't have any jobs right now. And, well, I could sell. I could do this. Nothing. Okay. And his name was Mike. And so I wanted that job, right? And so I go back a few weeks later. Now they have tiles on the floor. They're getting some equipment delivered. Locker rooms are done. But they're still not open for business completely.
Right.
And I go and ask. I say, hey, what do you need? Somebody to clean the equipment? Do you need a salesperson? Do you need somebody to sit behind the front desk? Whatever. Right. I'm here for you. Nope. No job for you, right? So then I wait a couple more weeks, 3 more weeks, and it's full. Okay, it's getting ready. They're doing their pre-sales, and it's open. So I go in there and didn't talk to him. I went right over and picked up a broom and started to sweep up all the drywall dust and everything that had landed. And I didn't work for him, and he was with people, so he couldn't just drop and come over and start talking to me. And so he came over to me, and he's like, I told you I don't have a job. I said, yeah, but you could use somebody to do what I'm doing and stuff. And he's like, you're right. You're hired. So I got the job. Well, I ended up managing that down the road. I ended up managing that particular location. Moved to Arizona. Started a fitness consulting business. Guess who hired me back to come back and tune up his... He had multiple gyms at this time, so I was back helping him restore and the sales capacity and stuff that we once had in multiple locations now with that exact same guy. But it all started with the willingness to pick up a broom. Right. A lot of people will say, I don't want to sweep in floors. Well, you may never get a job then, okay? Right. Because if you don't know that industry, you don't know your way around, you may not have any option but pick up the broom first and work your way up.
So willingness to do the uncomfortable, dirty work.
That's it. And but with the intent to grow. What's your goal? Do you want to run that company one day? Okay. So start with the broom. And then guess what you're going to learn? Every single facet of the business too. So you're going to have perspective that will help you find the inefficiencies and make it better than anybody could because you know what that guy's going through. And you also know what the locker room attendant's going through. And you know what the front desk person's going through because you've done all the jobs. Yeah. And so that is something that gives you perspective and opportunity. And you'll end up probably making a lot more money than everybody else as well.
So on the point of perspective, one of the things along your career obviously got into politics, which is a bit of a deviation from business. But what got you into politics? You know, you were chairman of the Republican Party for Arizona, and then were you a senior advisor in Trump's administration as well?
Yeah.
What led you to get into that? A lot of people, I think, are fearful of politics and don't want to be involved in that capacity. So what got you involved in it? Where did that journey start for you?
So it really started with the book that you mentioned. So I used to write a lot of economic articles, and then I was had this concept with the book, right? You have all this engagement with union discussions where people say unions are bad, and these people say unions are good, and there are negative and positive impacts both on people, workers, corporations, stuff like that, and trying to find it. So I thought, hey, I'll start writing about what the real impact is, real data to support, not just emotional arguments and discussions and such.
Sure.
So I started writing the book. I was on an airplane flying to D.C., and there's a group called American Legislative Exchange Council. It's a very thoughtful think tank and fiscally, nonpartisan, incredible group as far as economic development. And this guy just had to be a director, was kind of leaning over my shoulder, reading what I was typing as I'm on the airplane. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, you writing a book about labor unions? And I was like, yeah. So we start talking. Long story short, he gets me involved. And when I finished the book, I ended up being a speaker for them for labor, commerce, tax policy, and fiscal policy. Oh, wow. And it was, they call them the States and Nation Policy Summits, thousands of lawmakers that show up there, and it's pretty neat. But politics directly impacts capitalism, corporate America, everything you do. From getting your trash removed from your home. I mean, there's taxes there. You pay them, right? Yeah. All the way to the lights that turn on. You name your water, the land, the dust in our farm fields. I mean, I'm serious. Like in Arizona, there's these dust requirements of the EPA. If you have Farm A, which is a dirty, dusty piece of dirt like we have in Arizona, and Farm B has a dirty, dusty piece of dirt, but they have different crops or what have you, the EPA will come out and measure each other's soil, and if your dirt to a certain degree is in there, they fine you. If it blew into their land just a little too much that month or what have you, you will be fined for it. So that impacts what? It impacts farmers. That impacts our consumption, the cost of goods. I mean, it's like, so you see it all roll together. So that's when I started writing, and I started to travel around the country, speaking at different universities and everything. And then that's where my name kind of got in the mix as somebody that could articulate some of these financial topics in a simple way that people could get them.
Sure.
And then the Republican Party, all the parties always have problem with leadership here and there at different times, and it was in shambles here in Arizona, kind of similar to where it is right now. And so I had started getting recruited to come in to do that.
Yeah. What was in shambles with the party? Because you said it's kind of that way now, and it was before.
So parties, the public doesn't really understand. You can say I'm a member of the Republican Party, and what that means is you pull the jersey on, okay? And you're going to vote. You believe that the governing principles of a Republican are going to be better than a Democrat, right? So, or other. And the apparatus of a party, so in our state we have the state party, and then you have 30 districts, legislative districts. You have the different counties. Each one of those have committees, and they have people that are within them, right?
Yeah.
The whole purpose, which somehow people forget, is those committees are to get Republicans elected, period. That's it. Not have policy discussion. We can learn about policy together, but we're not supposed to be out there, talking about Second Amendment or open borders and things like that. We're to get people elected that are going to follow the principles that we've espoused as Republicans and do it. So you focus mainly on that. So in the past, what happened is it's today and mostly forever, except for when I had 2 terms as the chairman. We did not let policy muddy the waters of our mission of getting Republicans elected. So the primaries are for people to vote for who the Republicans vote for who they want to be representing them in their district, the statewide, the county, whatever, school board. And once they've made that decision, then it's the party's job, in concert with the candidate, to get them elected in the general election.
I see.
Okay, so leading up to the general election, parties should be raising money, setting up, doing what we call identification work with the voter base, so we know how to talk to them to get them to take action in the right way. And so you get all that kind of stuff in place and do it. So what had happened and what happens today, what happened not so much with the immediate last chair. She was crazy. She just wanted to talk policy, get everybody frothy. It was a way to keep it disorganized so she could maintain power. It was horrific. And so what happens is everybody starts rowing in different directions, because you could be in the same room with a bunch of conservatives and one person feels a certain way about immigration than another. But they may agree on everything else. But though that issue, they may be off a little bit. And so they fight. They don't become productive anymore. One stops coming to the meetings because the other guy's there.
Yeah.
Whatever. And so it's not. But if you say, hey, we need to get Republicans elected, everybody goes, yeah. We need to get. So it's an easy common thread to maintain continuity and best outcome. And so when I became chair, I had all this business background. And so I organized everything, and we did everything based upon specific executables, knocking on doors, making phone calls. How do you do the identification work? Whatever technology we're going to deploy to make sure we have the best outcome. And then we organize it, put a business plan together, hand it out to all the districts and counties. And some said, hey, screw you, we're not going to do what you tell us to do because, we're an autonomous committee, which they are. And most of them were saying, thank you, we need a direction, what have you. So what happened is the whole discussion became less emotional. We didn't have the hatred that you see now when people disagree on topics. Oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. Okay, they're not moving their cause one way or another. If anything, they're just killing everything. As far as outcomes. And so we made it so that the people that really couldn't even be in the same room with each other would stand across from each other, stuff in envelopes. We could have had machines do that, but I made the decision to have it done manually, so I could get a bunch of people in the room together that don't like each other, and they could work together. So all of a sudden that continuity happened, and we went on. Well, Arizona started having more successes than anybody in the country. So we won all of our elections in the 2014 cycle was my first cycle, and then 2016 was the second cycle. We won everything. I mean, one of the news articles said, the AZ GOP paints Arizona with a bigger, brighter red brush, okay? Because we took over everything. Congressional majority, Senate majority, everything.
What, David?
This is dead.
Keep going.
Yeah, so So we had tremendous success because we were focused on the right issues. And then when you have that kind of success, the media is going to call you.
Right.
And so then I had a lot of interviews, both radio, television, you name it. And then Trump saw one of the interviews, and I got a call to speak. I think it was either CNN, that's probably CNN, and they needed a fill-in. And just asked me to fill in and see if that would work out. And I did, and he watched that, and everybody watched it. And they said, hey, maybe this guy could be one of our surrogates.
Right.
And so I became a surrogate.
What does that mean exactly? You
speak on behalf of the President Trump, or at that time he was candidate Trump. And so whatever comes out of your mouth is equivalent to as if he was saying it.
I see.
So it's a dangerous spot, right, for you personally.
Right.
But it's one that is pretty cool experience. I was on, once I accepted the surrogate and the senior advisor position, I was on Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, you name it, twice a day. You know, I mean, I'd get calls at 11 o'clock at night saying there's going to be a car in front of your house at 2 in the morning because of the Eastern Standard Time. And so a lot of the shows start at 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning Eastern Standard Time. So I was, wiping the sleepy seeds out of my eyes and, learn how to do my own makeup and go, on these different shows. And it was cool. So you had to study again. So back to the stuff we were talking about earlier in preparation, you have to know something about everything.
Right. Okay,
you really do, because you don't know what's going to come. If it's going to be Hillary Clinton's emails, is it what's happening in the Middle East? Is what's a hegemon? Is it what does oil and gas do to our economy? What about inflation? You name it. I mean, the FBI, the CIA's position, our deployment in this state or this country, or you're going, oh my gosh, you have to know something about everything. So you have to be constantly feeding information in your brain from both sides.
Right.
Okay. It can't be just this conservative rags they read because you look like a fool, and it has to be perspective from both. And so you gain a bunch of knowledge, but it's effort, right? And so I had a lot of success with that. And one of the things that, I don't know who your listeners are, but every time before I go, and live TV is better, okay, because they can't wordsmith you,
right?
And but it's the most dangerous, right? Because that's where you can screw up, and if you freeze, it's right there. Yeah. And if you say something bad, then they start to work you. Right. And so I would say prayer every time, and I'd pray that the Spirit would put words in my mouth and my mind, or mind and mouth, so that I would not screw up, and to do this in protection of our nation, just to give me the answers. And so, I mean, I was Wolf Blitzer, Jake Tapper, Anderson Cooper, Don Lemon, which is the most horrific thing I've ever done. All these people and then on Fox, you name the people, and the Newsmax and all these other different groups. It was constant. It was exciting and a lot of work.
Yeah.
But it was, again, if you want it, it may find its way to you too. And I didn't necessarily want that, okay, because it's a lot of work. Yeah. And then we became, in the 2016 election, the Arizona GOP was 32% of all the voter contact nationwide. So when they would call around and do the numbers, we started doing all this stuff for other states because we were managing 1% of the Republican National Committee's budget and doing 3-4 times what they were actually doing on that budget, because we were utilizing resources efficiently and with the right intent. And so it was so Trump, of course, Steve Bannon was there at the time. You had Corey Lewandowski, all these guys, and Brian Jack. There's a whole bunch of people that were very influential in the campaign, and they were all like, come on, let's go. And so I spent a lot of time in the White House, which was pretty cool, and helped to write the new NAFTA plan, wrote the first version with Mexican counterpart, and then they morphed from there and stuff. So it was just a really cool, helped with the tax reform. I was a surrogate for the tax reform that Trump did, and you got to believe it if you want to talk about it. And so they let you be a part of doing it, so you can talk about it more effectively. So, and that's where Trump is an exceptional leader. What you see on TV is very different than his personal reality. Okay? Sure. He is very thoughtful. He's one of the best listeners I've ever encountered. You'll sit in a room with people, and a topic will come up that you think is just the biggest waste of time. You look over at him, and he's listening to every single word these people are saying. He's hanging. He's not interrupting him. He's letting him talk. He may have a few more questions. If he doesn't find value with that person or topic, he'll dismiss. Won't tell him to leave, but he just won't talk to him, engage him anymore. Sure. But he is thoughtful in every sense of the word. My family's had remarkable experiences with him, and I've watched him do things for people that nobody heard about. They should have heard about it, but they didn't. Like one example was a transit worker in New York City driving across one of the bridges, looks out the window. In the daytime, there's a young woman about to jump off, and he's got a full bus, stops his bus, okay, and this transit worker, and the reason I'll just say his race, he's black man, because, Trump gets all this criticism about being racist, whatever. This guy stops, gets out, talks this woman off the ledge, okay, so she literally climbs down. Cops are there now, everybody's there, whatever. She comes over and she snuggles up the guy, cries, whatever. But this man, whatever magic he was able to perform at that time, saved this woman's life, and it was awesome, right?
Wow.
So a matter of a couple weeks later, Trump sends him $10,000. Says, I know what transit workers make, and I know life can probably be hard at different times, and you just saved this person's life, and and this is, and nobody knew about this because he didn't publicize this. He could have, right?
Right.
And but he just said, "Here's $10,000, for you to maybe make your life a little easier. And thanks for saving hers,
Yeah.
And this is why New York should be such a great place, because of people like you. So here you go. I mean, it's like you don't hear those stories. If people heard those stories, they might like the guy a lot more,
Right.
But it's but in this particular case, he did something astonishing, and this man did something astonishing. This man, I mean, he's a hero, right?
Yeah.
And he was recognized as such. The hurricanes that happened, I can't ever remember the name of the hurricane that happened in the 2016 election cycle, but I called. I mean, Obama did a Zoom call with the mayor down there and a couple of the cities that were hit the hardest, and hey, we'll send help. We'll get FEMA down there, and you guys, hey, pat on the back, whatever. And then Hillary Clinton started coming out saying, well, I think I'm going to do a Zoom call too with them. And I called Steve Bannon, and I said, Steve, you need to go there. Trump needs to go to ground zero and be there. That's what leaders do, okay? And he said, write it up, give me a page. So write up a quick one-pager, send it to him. Literally the next day, okay, Trump is on the ground in the hurricane thing, walking around, doing things. But the one thing he and Pence did that was unique was he also filled multiple semi-trucks full of food, diapers, water, everything that people would need, necessities. He paid for it all. Okay,
wow.
So it was like, so they get down there, and I remember watching this, and he was going through one of the hurricane survivors' homes, and it was an old guy. This guy must have been in his late 70s, maybe even early 80s. And he was showing Trump around at some of the pictures and stuff and furniture that had been destroyed. And he points to this wall where you could see the stain of the water line. It was almost to the ceiling. Okay, so his entire house has to be destroyed and rebuilt, right?
Yeah.
And so at that time, one of the organizers says to Trump, hey, we have to go. It's time to move on to And so Trump puts his hand out to shake his hand, and the guy hugs him. He bypasses his hand, just squeezes him. Yeah. And if you haven't noticed in the public eye, he's not a big hugger, okay? But this guy's hug, he wasn't letting go, okay? And so Trump gave him this big hug. And when he was doing the hug, I saw him kind of settle in a little bit. Like, how people do that, they kind of relax when they give somebody a hug. He did that. And I saw the mantle of the presidency fall on his shoulders right that time. It was at that moment I knew he was going to be the president of the United States. And people were witnessing this because the news was there and stuff like that too. And I thought, man, this is the guy people need to learn. This is the leader, not this fascist that people are talking about. All these things, it's pretty ridiculous what the labels they're putting on him in this last ditch effort to try to get Kamala to become the president. But it's but again, here's a guy that's failed multiple times. Yeah, pulled himself back up. However you think of the guy's personality, it's his style, it's his process, it's his mode of operation, and it's worked for him. That wouldn't work for me. Okay, I'd probably get in a lot of fist fights if I tried to talk like him or do things. But it was, but it would be. But anyways, it was a remarkable experience to go. But it was all back to, you have an idea. Can you draw a line from A to B? Yeah. Can you show how you get to the outcome that you're defining? And if you can do that, people think you're credible. Yeah. Okay, and you are, especially if you have the outcome that you define. So,
Hurricane Hermione.
Maybe.
And then there was Hurricane Matthew also. But Hermione hit Florida.
Wasn't Florida. It was probably north. It was probably like North Carolina or something like that. I don't know where it was.
Tropical Storm Bonnie hit South Carolina and portions of North Carolina.
It might have been that one.
Yeah.
So
and then Tropical Storm Colin.
No, you're good.
Lost that year. It was an active year. There was a ton of it.
Yeah. He just got pounded.
Yeah.
So lean into obviously the elections next week.
Mm-hmm.
What was different? 2016 gets elected, 2020 doesn't get elected, and then obviously now he's running this time. So what's, from your perspective, what was different in 2020 versus 2016? Obviously, there's a lot of claims of election fraud and interference and things like that, but what was different in 2020? What is it looking like now, just from your perspective, having been in it?
Yeah.
Does he win? Does he not win? Is there a good chance? And
it's tough. Yeah, this is, so 16 Trump had the right message.
Yeah.
Okay. The message was make America great again. And if you really listen to him, he would say make America great again, make America rich again, make America safe again, make America whatever. He was focused on making the world better, okay, for Americans. And even when he was elected, man, he would go out and talk to the UN stuff, and he focused on America first. It was awesome, to listen to him talk.
Yeah.
And he didn't do it in a way that was bombastic. He did it in a way as a leader would do.
Yeah.
But his whole focus was the people at that time, whether they liked him or not, they could actually say, make America great again. They didn't define MAGA as a bad thing. I mean, if you look at what MAGA stands for, it's a pretty good thing, right?
Sure.
And so, but he did a really good job in defining that. And then he brought people to the vision of what it meant to be make America great again. And so that won the election because he inspired people on what was possible. Obama did it with hope and change. His first election, it was all focused on hope and change.
Yeah.
He didn't define what hope was. He didn't define what he was going to change. He let you dream about that.
Yeah.
He says hope and change. I want hope. I want change. I think it should change like this. He's saying it's going to change, and they finished the puzzle for him.
Sure.
And he changed it. I think a lot of people wish he wouldn't have changed it the way he did, but for the most part, he let them use their imagination and inspired people.
Sure.
It was a masterful campaign. Make America Great Again was a masterful campaign. Hillary Clinton was lost. She didn't have, it was hope, it was believe. It was like 25 different taglines. They couldn't get to one spot where people could kind of sink in and do it. And in 2020, Biden couldn't do it either. Trump had that election. If Trump would have stood up in front of the people and said, look what I've done the last 4 years. Your cost of living has gone down. The cost of oil and gas has gone way down. Yeah. It's cheaper at the grocery store. Oh, yeah, Hispanics is the lowest unemployment you've ever had in this country. Blacks, lowest unemployment you've ever had in this country. More equivalent pay for females. Whether you like this comment or not, but more rights for gays and the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah.
Okay, he did that. Okay, and people are saying he didn't. He did that. All these things, environmental, better business, people were making more money, they had better quality of lives. If he would have stood there and said, that was me, that was me, that was me, that was me, everybody would have said, you're getting reelected. But what did he do? He stood in front of the microphone and said, I hate Joe Biden. I hate Hunter Biden. They should both be in jail. Hillary Clinton should be in jail. Hunter should be in jail because of all these indiscretions, and Biden knew it. Joe Biden knew all this stuff. And he just could not get back on the trail. I had a conversation that basically, the feedback I got was, he said, the people know what I did for them. I don't have to remind them. Well, guess what? Americans are immediate gratification people. It's what's in front of our face because we're so busy.
Yeah.
You have to remind people. Mm-hmm. He didn't remind anybody what was going on. So there's voter fraud in every single election to some degree.
Sure.
Okay, and not as big as it was claimed in the 2020, but there was really bad stuff in 2020. Okay,
yeah.
There were some states that tipped over that wouldn't have tipped if it wasn't for some of the indiscretions that happened. For sure, saw it personally. Worked with the law enforcement. I can tell you verbatim some of the stuff. Okay.
Wow.
But the reality is when you inspire the voter base, it just wipes fraud out. There's no way that fraud can keep it because it's
just can't beat it.
Yeah, you can't get enough people to do what you need them to do to turn the election, unless it's a anemic turnout or what have you and stuff.
Yeah.
The turnout was even fake. If you look at the numbers, there were some states that had 110% turnout. That's not possible, right?
Yeah.
So how come that wasn't ever talked about? And so you look at it, but he lost because he failed to inspire people. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden was getting smashed, right? Because this election before Kamala got involved, because not just because he was not quick on the move, with his potential dementia, whatever else they say he has. But it was because people were saying, "Hey, my life is more expensive. You we're getting attacked at all our Air Force bases around the world. We're do this. They're like listing out all these things. People, we're not safe. Look what's happening at our borders." There was nothing there. Trump comes along and says, "You know what? Hey, I'll fix all that again." People go, "Oh, okay." Well, Kamala comes along, and what does she do? She takes that narrative. I'm going to make your life better. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to work hard for you people. And, everybody with any kind of brain behind their eyes is saying, "We hear you. We see you. But aren't you the one that was the vice president the last 4 years?"
Right.
So at first, they got enamored with the message.
Sure.
Okay? And the promise that life would become easier.
Yeah.
Now they're filtered. And Trump did not do what he should have done then. He should have stayed on the message. She says this. I did that.
Right.
She gave you higher gas. I gave you lower gas. I mean, very easy contrast. And voters need it. Not that we're not smart. Sometimes we need it just dialed down so we can get to the answer faster, right? And so people with good communication skills will do that. And but instead, he started getting onto the vitriol of her because all her claims, the different ethnicities and oh my gosh,
accents
and just her
all the different
her different profession claims and stuff like that. I've had personal experiences with Kamala, and she's pretty disgusting as far as her lack of any human characteristic that you would ever look up to. She's pretty gross.
Is she just not competent, or what?
She's not super smart as it relates to any one of the jobs she's had. She's politically, she adapts very well, and her indiscretions to get to office and stuff like that are just sickening. But she's a grandstander, and she knows how to leverage the media and do things like that. And she also knows that she's got them on her side.
Sure.
So if you look up at even like Drudge or anything, you look at the top articles, every one of them is against Trump. It's just like, give me a break. Really? It's like, did he really say that? Oh, the McDonald's fry guy in Oakland, California is upset that Trump got a fry pin.
Right.
Is that really the article right now? It really is.
Yeah.
These kind of things. And so it's just pathetic how the media is trying to pound him down because the momentum shifted. So now people are starting to hear Trump's talk about make America great again. This, that, and he's starting to inspire people a little bit more. She's getting angry because she doesn't know what to say anymore because her numbers are sliding. So what is she doing? She's attacking Trump. That does not work.
Yeah.
Okay? It does if you let somebody else attack. But if you, the candidate, attack, you're going to end up getting in trouble.
Do you think him bringing on these outside people, J.D. Vance, Elon, RFK Jr., do you think those people help his case? Do they not help his case?
I think so. I think JD is interesting because nobody really knows him.
Right.
He's kind of he's really been propped up by Peter Thiel. There's a story there that's interesting, and but I think he's articulate. He did fantastic in the debate, and people started to see compassionate, thoughtful answers, stuff like that. And they're like, okay, maybe this guy really is, Right. And so that was helpful. Elon is Elon. I don't think it was a Trump bringing him on. It was Elon putting himself in the mix.
Interesting.
Because, she even said it, Kamala Harris, that she's going to censor social media.
Yeah.
I mean, why would the government be smarter than the people, right? It's like, give me a break. I think you don't want to have horrific individuals that are using social media to kill people and do things.
Sure.
But free speech, come on. Right. And so I think that's how they kind of dragged him in a little bit more, is all her declarations of what she's going to do. I mean, it's not America.
Right.
That's the fastest way to kill them. Any kind of democratic process in any nation is to censor the way people communicate. And so I think that's it. I think those guys were just all fell into place. There's some people that he brings around him that are just not beneficial at all. And but I think they do move because Elon appeals to certain people. JD appeals to certain people. And then if you go right down the list of people that he has as endorsers and stuff like that, they touch different parts of the voter base. And that's the idea. When I was chairman, I ran, the very first endorsement I came out with was a guy that was a very fringe, far right guy endorsing, but he had a lot of followers.
Yeah.
When that endorsement came out, it freaked out the more moderate base of the Republican Party because they'd had bad interactions with this guy because he was a guy that liked to infight more than fight the enemy.
Right.
And so I started getting messages that were horrible from these moderates. Okay, I can't believe you had him endorsed. And then 2 or 3 days later, I came up with an endorsement that they all liked. And they were like, whoa, what just happened? Right. And so all of a sudden, I started to list these endorsements, one on each side of the teeter-totter, and I had the entire base of the Republican Party endorsing, from the Ron Paul, kind of more libertarian part of the Republican Party, all the way to the most moderate part of the party. People endorsing. I was the only, I think, chairman in history in the country that was endorsed by the Right to Life organization, stuff like that. So that, and people go, oh, okay. You know, like, now they're starting to see how you stand politically. They see who you align with, but then it confuses people. Yeah. So they go, but they're all supported. So they say, that's our guy. And that's the first election I won 77% of the vote. The second election was 83% of the vote. Wow. And that was, again, historic, but it was because we had this base. They felt like they had a voice. They did stuff. And I think Trump, by bringing together the right model as it relates to endorsers and things like that, and that political directors should be thinking that way, then that's when you start to bring people along. So again, Ronald Reagan used to say things like, when crazy people would endorse him, I think the KKK endorsed Ronald Reagan, and he was, people flipped, right? Yeah. And he said, look, I didn't endorse them, they endorsed me. I don't have control over who endorses me, okay? And so it's kind of that thing. And again, there's a colorful group that might go, look who endorsed Reagan, and then they do it. Yeah. But for the most part, just understanding the endorsement is, again, somebody in that world finds value associated with that candidate, and they usually have a following. Yeah. And they're not going to post endorsements or things like that of people that are not significant, but they will. People that have a name and have some recognition. Elon Musk is, I think he's helping. I don't think he's hurting anything. I think he's helping. And then J.D. Vance, I think, was helpful at the very beginning. He wasn't. Some of the things he was saying, and then he's matured quickly. That makes him smarter. And then
I think that debate did him a lot of help against walls.
I had people that were not Trump fans at all that are actively working on his behalf now because of J.D. Vance on that debate. I might have to call it here pretty soon.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on, taking some time. This has been super fascinating. I know I've learned a bunch, and I think people listening will as well. Do you have anything to add?
I'd say just back to, if it's young people trying to make a mark on the world and be successful, apply yourself. Yeah. Don't be a bystander. Engage, and that's when you're going to have the most fun, and you probably experience some of the biggest losses, but at the same time, you will have the best possible outcome when you engage.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Robert. Appreciate you coming on. We'll do it again.
All right. Let's do it. You got it.